Meeting's going to be live streamed.
All right, we're live. Good morning, everyone. Happy Sabbath. Happy 4th of July. It's a day of celebration for our nation as well as for our church. You'll notice that I have a mask on today. I'm here in the studio in the church this week. So we are all with masks. And so we're broadcasting live, and today is going to be our first in-person worship service since February. So we're excited about that. So it's our nation's birthday as well, and it's Dottie Kruger's birthday. So we wish her happy birthday, and I think someone's going to lead us in song. So whomever that is, that's not me, please go ahead.
We could ask Dottie to lead. She's the choir leader.
She could do that.
I think we'll just start. Ready? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Dottie. Happy birthday to you. Oh boy.
That was
doesn't
wonderful.
work so well.
It doesn't. We
better on Facebook, doesn't it?
How do those choirs do it without the delay?
They have to have headphones of some sort. So,
sorry.
Yeah, they're set up a little differently.
Oh, sorry.
We're not quite that sophisticated. We'll work on that for the next birthday next year.
Beautiful.
Did you already wish Dottie a happy birthday?
Yes.
Oh, happy birthday, Dottie.
We just sang, Bev.
Okay.
I think you have to sing by yourself now.
No, you don't want that.
All right. Well, welcome, everyone. Welcome live on Zoom. If you're on live, thank you for joining. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you for joining there as well. A couple of weeks ago, we talked briefly about missions. We're going to have a mission story live here in a moment. I'm going to do a screen share. We'll be able to see a video. We haven't done a lot of those types of things, mission story, thoughts from the superintendent, collection of offering for Sabbath school, special music, those types of things since February when we got together at last. So we're not together for Sabbath school here in the building today. We're continuing to do our virtual work and our virtual study time. So someone asked about missions and where things were last week. So we want to go to the mission field here today. This is the beginning of the third quarter. And the focus of the 13th Sabbath offering this quarter is for the West Central Africa Division. So I have a short video. I'm going to share my screen and we will get that video started. All right. And we are ready. Here we go.
We're not hearing any audio.
All right, hold on. Let me start this over. I'm going to stop sharing and start sharing again. See if that helps with the problem.
These ruins used to be a beautiful church. Now this place has been claimed by plants. But hope is not gone. Just like these plants, the Seventh-day Adventist Church took root in this country nearly 100 years ago. In 1926, the first Adventist missionaries to Liberia, R. Helbig and E. Flammer, arrived. A year later, these German missionaries established Liberia's first Adventist church.
I started going to church here in 1989 by my late father, who was once a deacon of the church. He used to carry me to church when I was a little child and brought the school here, and they encouraged us, the young children from the church, to come here and go to school. There I was in the school, and then he talked to me to join the baptismal class in the church. So at that time, I used to come to church by my dad, but I was not too regular. But from his effort, I was able to be convinced and become a member of the church.
After Elder May was baptized, the First Liberian Civil War erupted. Political and military conflict forced many church members to flee. During the war, both the church and the school were burnt down by rebels.
We could hear guns sound. Yeah, we could hear guns sound. So those who left behind gave us the information that your church is broken down, is being burnt.
A place which was once a blessing and a source of joy was now reduced to ruins. But after the conflict subsided, a faithful group worshipped in the only area that survived the destruction. To this day, they joyfully worship together and are confident that if the place is rebuilt, the congregation can be restored to what it once was. Sadly, this small group's funds are limited. It would take a miracle for them to reconstruct even a portion of the building.
If I had money, I would do it on my own. With the congregation that we have here, we are not able to even face one structure here. So my anticipation is for the World Church to come to our aid so that this place can be rebuilt.
Your 13th Sabbath offering will help rebuild the birthplace of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Liberia, where a place of worship and a school can be established again. Please pray for God's people in Liberia so that this dream can become a reality. Thank you for your support of the 13th Sabbath offering this quarter.
All right. Well, time is marching forward, and we have Dr. Larry Losey with us. He's leading our study time today. So with our Sabbath school time and everyone online ready to go, Larry, let's get started.
I think it will help if I unmute this. And I am incredibly embarrassed because I just now found out that I'm teaching this morning.
Oh, no.
I can totally understand that it's my fault. I'm sure that our class leader sent out the schedule and I ignored it. And so, wow, I did briefly go through the lesson, and there's wonderful things about why do we do mission work? And that's a fantastic question, because we devote a lot of our attention to that. Not all church groups, not all religious groups believe in missions, proselytizing, conversion. Many feel like if you are interested, we're glad to have you, but they are much more inward directed than outward directed. And that certainly has been a major part of our Adventist church since its inception. And you look back, late 1700s, there became a big movement for world missions. Last week, I was mowing some lawn and got to talking with the pastor of the Baptist church that adjoins my property. And it's interesting because he was a missionary in the Philippines and was friends with many of the Adventist missionaries there, received health care at the Adventist hospital in the town that he was in. Similarly, when he was in Burma. I'm sorry, what? Oh. But he was in Rangoon, Burma, and went to the Adventist hospital in Rangoon, got a penicillin shot for a strep throat. But we talked a lot. I didn't get my lawn mowed as fast as I should have, but I had a great talk with Pastor Courier about missions and about why are we so interested in mission and why so many people are not. Now, I have a mission field right here, as you can see, but why are we involved in missions? Let's make that not a rhetorical question, but why do people why are we involved in missions? Why are missions such a important part of our church organization, our church function, our church mission is very much that. Anyone want to speak?
First of all, Larry, Jesus says, go and make believers of all nations. And so the command is there from Christ.
Yeah, we call that the Great Commission from Matthew 25, right? And is it a duty? Is it a privilege? Is it inevitable?
How about a command?
Yeah, that is a command. But
having been there and done that is a blessing. It's a true blessing.
And everyone that I know that has gone on foreign missions, the high school students that have gone on foreign missions, the college students that go and spend a year teaching in the South Sea Islands or doing other things, people that go on Maranatha trips, come back changed. They're different people. They have a different perspective on things. Why does God use us? Can't the angels do a better job of it?
That'd be so.
Rhetorical.
Not totally rhetorical. We need it.
That's right.
And, you know, it says a lot more that to be approached by a peer. William, please. To be approached by a peer human being and do that. Now, our first missionaries were sent out for a long period of time, weren't they? My great uncle was a missionary to India and helped start Spicer College. But it was in the 1920s, 7 years that they were out before they returned to the United States. They knew that their parents were going to die while they were gone. And when I listen to the old-time missionaries tell their stories, I stand aghast at, the tropical diseases, the headhunters, the isolation that they had. In the mid-1970s, or early 70s, between college and medical school, I spent most of a school year in the Philippines, and I was pretty amazed. We were in the center of the island of Bukidnon. It was 100 miles to a commercial airport, 35 miles on a gravel road to the nearest telephone, post office, anything. But if my parents got the timing right, I could get an aerogram, a little thin piece of paper that they had written on, in 5 days. And that was pretty amazing.
Little side fold-up envelope?
Yep. Oh, yeah. Those were loads of fun. And at Christmas, I went up to Manila, and I booked some special time at the RCA building in Makati, and I was actually able to give them a telephone call. But it had to be pre-booked. And now, when my son 20 years ago was student missionary in Beijing, we could direct dial him. Now you can FaceTime all around the world. So we're a lot closer, but there's still just the incredible value to us and to the people we're going to see to have human beings dedicated to Christ coming there. Who is the first missionary? I saw David's lips moving, but I didn't hear an answer.
Enoch?
Paul?
Okay. It depends on whether we're talking Old Testament, New Testament, pre the crucifixion, post-crucifixion. But when you read the Old Testament, Enoch, he certainly was a missionary. Things were pretty bad at the time, and he lived an exemplary life. Noah tried to be a missionary, not very successful. I'll pick on Karen. Who is the apostle that went to India? Oh, I don't hear you.
Thomas.
Yeah, and pretty good evidence that Thomas, the Apostle Thomas, went to India. And I'm sorry, Karen and David, I've seen your lips moving, but we haven't heard any sound coming from you. It doesn't say that you're muted, but I'm sorry. I know that Karen Landa and also Karen Gimbel spent time in India.
Yes.
Oh.
So
You might have to turn the volume up on your iPad.
I think they're dialed in from phone, Kieran and David. And I think your phone is now unmuted.
We're struggling.
We
Yep,
heard that.
We can hear you now.
Oh, good. There's a bunch of Christians that were in India on the coast, or toward Goa.
Speak louder.
Yeah. And I think it was the Apostle Thomas that was supposed to have been the one that founded that group. Yeah.
yeah, and it's interesting how there were some amazing missionary stories with missionaries to India, to China, to Africa, Ethiopia. Of course, you think back, Solomon had a visitor from Ethiopia. The Ethiopian church claims descendants from the original apostles. And then you look in Egypt, there's the Coptic church that has been in existence since very, very early in apostolic times. So we don't see much about the New World until Columbus came. And if you read about Columbus, you'll see that mission work, furtherance of the Catholic Church, was among Columbus's biggest reason for coming to the New World, in addition, of course, to fame and fortune. So why does God want us to be missionaries? Why does he want us to witness?
He wants everybody saved.
Yeah.
Every person is a creature of God.
You know, that's our memory text in Timothy 2, 3, and 4. Desires all men to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth.
His kingdom growth depends upon us.
It's kind of scary, isn't it?
Larry, I thought it was pretty, well, I was struck with your question about witnessing. Is it a command? Is it something else? And is it inevitable? And the answer is yes to all of that. And go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, there have been times in my life when I have done things that I deeply regret having done. And it's really scary how those have come back to bite me later. And the very wrong witness that I made by my speech, by my actions in some occasions. And if we're honest with ourselves, I think we all can see times like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
can I throw out a what if?
Sure.
And this frequently bothers me because there are millions and billions, I'm sure, of people who have never heard the gospel. And I don't know whether we have the answer, but God knows each one's heart. And I just wonder, even though they didn't know about the Bible and Christ and his saving power, are they forever lost, having never been able to even hear? It was not an election on their part.
And in one of Ellen White's writings, and I regret not doing the preparation that I should have for this, She talks about people who will be in heaven who had never heard the name of Christ.
Larry,
That's reassuring.
there's some place that in the Bible that kind of says that people would be lost if we don't do our thing. And I have to kind of think that God will not let somebody miss out on heaven because we failed. I think he'll use somebody else. And as Morris Venden said when he talked about that, he said the person that will lose their soul if they don't is perhaps us, because that's how our spiritual growth is made. Because those are the two commandments: love God and love others. And so if we don't do it, our soul is in jeopardy. But I have to believe that God loves every soul and will give them an opportunity, for heaven or against it.
And
I have a thought or two, if I may. I'm just the new guy here, but
good. Welcome aboard, Jim.
Thank you. I was around for a while, a few years back, but I think anybody that's ever worked on commission before, they understand what differences is versus being hourly retail. And it's called the Great Commission. And I think it's a relational exercise to approach and sell something to somebody who already is looking in your department for something like that, and you have to find their needs. You have to approach them from where they are, not just one, but sometimes the entire couple, sometimes the entire family, sometimes only the mother-in-law. But it's, I think there's commandments, and this is also a commandment, but it's missionary work on commission is the way I've always looked at it. It could be somebody who you just meet in the grocery and you follow up with them a few weeks later when you see them again.
I like that analogy. I'd never thought of that before. That's good.
I'm a literalist. I go down to the definition of the words.
I once heard Sean Boostra talk, and I just remembered primarily just one thing from the talk was that his prayer is always, Lord, where are you working? And help me bump into them. And so the focus is mostly on what God is doing in preparing souls for heaven versus I got to get out there and do it.
Yeah. Similarly, in a seminar that we had years ago at the Brunswick Church, the Experiencing God series, there was one phrase that just really hit me that I keep remembering, and that was, why are we praying for God to bless what we're doing when we should be praying for God to help us to do what he is blessing? But witnessing is an inevitable. We will witness. Now, the question is, what will we witness and what will be the effect of our witness? But we will be a witness. Has everyone here had the opportunity to be a witness in court?
Yeah.
It's a pretty scary thing to go up there. And fortunately, we now have pediatricians specializing in child abuse. And in the first days in my practice, I used to have to go to court a number of times to testify for child abuse. One time there was a man that I saw in the ER that I got subpoenaed 4 times for to go to court to testify, Your Honor, in my professional opinion, he was drunk. It wasn't the light post on Main Street jumping out in front of him. But, it's a pretty scary thing to know what I say, what I do. If I testify falsely, I can be convicted of perjury. If I testify truthfully, someone might go to jail. Someone might be exonerated. And really, we are witnessing every day of our lives for the Almighty God. Now, if that isn't a scary thought, that we are his witness, we are his ambassador, and just every day, everything that we do will be a witness to those around us.
Larry, I love the song. I think somebody can help me out, called Thank You. about a man that goes to heaven, and he sees all these people, and he thinks he probably didn't do very much, and then somebody comes up to and says, "Thank you for giving your offering to the mission fields. Because of that, I was saved." Or a Sabbath school teacher comes up, and he's during that Sabbath school, even when he was little, he was affected by it, and all of a sudden, the Lord is showing him all these witnesses that he had done that he didn't even realize he had done. He just lived a good life and loved Jesus and was kind to others.
Well, what did Jesus say to the people that were not going to heaven and the people that were? And, this is what you did when you saw me hungry, naked, in need. And they said, "When did we do this to you?" That he very explicitly talks about how people will not know the witness that they have given until you get to heaven.
Larry, how does that keep us from just going on default mode, and keep us from witnessing?
I'm not clear what you're asking, Karen.
Well, we can just put it in default and put it out of our minds. Oh yeah, I'm just witnessing by just existing and having people see me. Or it's not, somebody's salvation doesn't depend upon me. Does it get off the hook, I guess is my question.
And over the last few decades, we've seen things go back and forth in terms of how aggressively should we be witnessing, I can frankly remember when I was younger that there were witnessing methods being advocated that were intrusive, unkind, hurtful, and counterproductive. And we do need to be intentional and say, I want to be ready and available to witness to God in all circumstances. I never cease to be amazed when I listen to some of the evangelists talk about the discussions that they've had on an airplane with someone, and how it just happens that they're always sitting next to someone that is receptive to them. And I've been impressed when I fly across the country on an airplane, how seldom does the person next to me want to talk to me.
Yeah. So what happens if we don't have the spiritual gift of evangelism? And where does that change? My personal witness versus a spiritual gift of evangelism.
I think, first of all, they shade one into the other. I certainly am vastly more comfortable talking with people that I have dealt with before, that have something in common with. For me to go stand on a street corner and start preaching would be an anathema. And yet there are people that can do that and can be effective at doing that. Tammy.
Hey, I just figured since by the way, you're doing a marvelous job for not knowing you were teaching. But I thought I'd help fill a minute of your time because Rob just sent out yesterday a parish note to our little parish. And I liked one of the paragraphs here, and I think it fits in with our lesson, so I'll read it for you. He said, "In studying for my youth Sabbath school, I read this verse from 1 Timothy 4:12. Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young or old or in between," he put, "but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity." Obviously, the parenthetical words are mine, but I believe they are reasonable and applicable in the context of this verse. Right now, especially right now, we have a great opportunity to set an example for good by the words we use, our peaceful conduct, and the love we exhibit to those around us. Our demeanor should reflect the character of the God we place our faith in. Let's be beacons of hope and love in these trying times.
Yeah.
That goes back to we're always witnessing, for good or for ill. But our demeanor should reflect the character of the God we place our faith in.
About 10 days ago, we had a church board meeting with a discussion about an issue. I don't want to get into the issue, that's not the point, but there was a wide divergence of strongly held opinion. And people were discussing why they felt this way, why they didn't feel that way, why they felt differently. And one of the board members said, this is pretty amazing. We have people here with widely divergent opinions, and we're listening to each other, we're respecting each other, there's no name calling. What made me feel sad was that was something extraordinary. That in our current culture, it is very much not that way.
Larry?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, when you're done.
Go ahead.
You have to do that.
I can't do justice to this, but I've just been your rise. Building community. Mm-hmm. And then kind of to answer, I think, Karen's question, that the way we've always considered, to go out to teach. Of course, he says teach is more clearly in the Greek, disciple. But he says our way has kind of been of giving information. So you get information, it's the right information. Mm-hmm. And then it goes on to say, who are the people to give information, through how you do it, seminars and everything. It's always the preachers, the spiritual gift of preachers and evangelism. And that's kind of it. And so that most of the members kind of pay their money towards that and let them do their work. He said, if you consider it to the kind of the non-information, then it becomes a relational thing. And the first one, it says, how do you know if you're doing well? You evaluate by numbers. And the second one is that in discipling, anybody in the church can do it. So it's a call for all of us to be able to have relationships and spread the gospel versus just the teachers and the preachers and the evangelists. And there's more details to it, and I apologize, I can't give it all. I need to listen to the sermon again. But it kind of opened my mind to realize we have depended on, most of my life, evangelism being done through evangelistic series and mission, whereas he's really saying go out and live among people and let them see Christ through you. And that's not saying these other things aren't important, but we've kind of gotten off the hook by kind of looking at, just evangelism in a certain way versus, oh my goodness, look at your kitty love you. That's so sweet. Anyways, it was just kind of a bit of a paradigm shift that I thought was challenging for my thinking.
Well, one of my most interesting classes in college was Introduction to General Semantics. It was taught by a communications department. And one of the things, the big phrase there is the map is not the territory. Our words are not the reality. That we're talking about abstract things that we have to communicate with words, but we can demonstrate things concretely. But one of the things that I took out of that class that I remember very clearly, we cannot communicate something which is not a common shared experience. That you have to find some commonality before you can start communication with people. And, that I think is a real foundation for our day-to-day witnessing. The more we are in touch with a person, share with them. And, when I'm seeing a new patient, I like to find out. I was talking with a new mother and father yesterday in the hospital, and they were from Friendship, Maine. I started talking with them, and I noticed that they had a little different accent than most of the people from Maine. Turned out they were both from Pennsylvania. And we talked about how interesting it is to come into a culture like Maine and then become enculturated with it. But I'm always going to be from away. I've only lived here for 46 years or 45 years. I'm from away. One of my ancestors was colonial governor of Massachusetts, so I can say we were just coming home. But I've always been from Maine. And when we first got here, we were told the story of a couple that came to Maine, had their children, realized they'd never be to Maine, but they were talking with the neighbor. They said, hey, we'll never be Mainers. At least our kids were born in Maine, they'll be Mainers. And the neighbor's response was, well, now, just because a cat has kittens in the oven, don't make them biscuits.
Yep.
But yes, Alice.
When you talk from being away, everyone even today asks me, "Oh, where are you from?" And it's interesting. There's a starting point. But I was thinking that each day our prayer should be, we don't know with whom we're going to speak today. We don't know where they're coming from. And it just seems like that each person has something deep in their heart or something that's on their mind or some difficulty that they're having, that sometimes they just need a listening, sympathetic ear to have someone to maybe inject some suggestions for solution from a different view. But I think having a listening ear, and this is what you were talking about even in your practice, to see where a person is coming from, what are the issues in their lives, and so forth.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll pick on Charlie because he's not here, so he can't hear me.
And he's fun to pick on.
He is. That for years he was in business, and I can brag on him because he was an honest car dealer. And his customers recognized that. I mean, they would call up from Michigan and say, I'm coming to pick up a car, pick up one for me, and I'll be there. But it was interesting. You didn't even realize the influence you were having. When Charlie almost died in 99, the customers so much realized that he was a spiritual-minded man, that he was a Christian man, and their comments and their cards and their visits, and they're saying, we're praying for you. And I've always told Charlie, because Charlie's not a preacher, he's not an evangelist, but I said, you have lived your religion through your work. And most of us have had those opportunities. For me, at Parkview for over 30 years, and when I left, I always considered that my mission field. But then all of a sudden, I was in a new mission field at Midcoast, and I was able to witness for God there, I pray and hope. So I think sometimes we don't realize, sometimes we're witnessing when we are witnessing and don't even know it.
Hey, Larry.
Sure.
Can I share something from my family history?
Please.
My maternal grandfather and grandparents, they lived in Brooklyn, New York, and their firstborn was a boy, and he died, crib death. Mm-hmm. And they were a different denomination, and it really bothered him. He was so perturbed, upset, and where was his child? What was going on? And so one day he was walking to New York City, and two variations of the story. One of them is through Central Park, and he heard someone on a soapbox, those soapbox preachers, talking about what happened when people died, and that they were asleep. And he turned right around and he pointed his finger at that man and he yelled out, "Prove it." And after that, he had Bible studies, and that's basically how our family is where we are today.
Wow. That's amazing. That is amazing. And random chance, huh? He just happened to be walking through the park, happened to be at that point in the preacher's sermon.
Mm-hmm. So, providential.
Absolutely. C.S. Lewis, I I gave a sermon about miracles several years ago, and I was reading C.S. Lewis's book on miracles, and I just love to saying that what is it? Coincidence is God's way of staying hidden.
Staying hidden.
Yeah, and I really appreciated that. Hey, when I actually did look through the lesson, so I'm not totally here, but I just really was hit by the Monday section. And since I am the teacher and I have the prerogative, I'm going to read it. If you haven't heard it before, I'm sure you'll enjoy it. If you read it before, think about it again. And so this title of the Monday section is Making Jesus Glad. Has anyone ever asked you, how's your day going? Or is everything all right with you today? What if you ask God those questions? God, how's your day going? What kind of response do you think you would receive? Maybe it would be a response like this. My day has been extremely difficult. Tears filled my eyes at 1,000 refugee camps filled with cold, hungry, crying children. I walked the streets of the world's crowded cities and wept with the homeless and the destitute. My heart breaks over abused women and frightened children sold into sexual slavery. I witnessed the ravages of war, the devastating effects of natural disasters, the painful agony of debilitating, deadly diseases. Would you respond back by asking, God, is there anything that makes you rejoice? Is there anything that brings joy to your heart? Is there anything that makes you sing? What makes God happy? Not a rhetorical question. Jump in. What makes God happy? If you ask God, what makes you happy? What do you think he would say to you?
One of the things that is brought out, Larry, is that he greatly rejoices over every soul that gives themselves to God. He says there's joy in heaven over one sinner that is saved.
Yeah. How many of you, raise your hands, how many of you have been involved in a teaching situation, a formal teaching situation as a teacher? Isn't that so amazing when you've been laboring with a student that had a chunk of wood between his ears, and all of a sudden the student gets it?
Mm-hmm.
And I see God as taking such great pleasure when we finally get it, when we finally see the true picture of who he is and what his plan is. How does this fit in with today's lesson? Anyone?
Patience.
Okay, patience. We all have blocks of wood between our ears, don't we? And it sometimes takes a while to get through. What else?
I think not to be judgmental about a person. We will suddenly say, well, da-da-da-da, and almost shuts that person off rather than recognize that they may be on a journey thought-wise. And to help them on that journey might be a different approach.
I'll have to share an anecdote from 35 years ago. Happened here in Brunswick. I was, our office and house were in the same building where the Stone Inn is now. And I wasn't on call one night, but I heard the office phone ring and ring and ring and ring. And so I finally answered it. And I took care of the issue. And I was really upset because the answering service was supposed to pick up the phone. And the next morning, I was getting ready to call the answering service and give them what for. And then I saw a news item that the Deering ice cream store on Main Street, it's part of where Key Bank is now on Main Street, they'd had a kitchen fire. And one of the things the firemen had to do was they had to go to the bell tone answering service upstairs and physically pick up and drag out the operator to get her out of the fire in the building that she was in, because she was determined to sit at her desk and do her duty. Man, did I feel glad that I hadn't followed through with my first impulse. And that's a gift that so many of us, and I believe me, I include myself, we don't do that. We don't just stop and think about it. We don't look for a possible good explanation for why something didn't happen the way we thought it should, and we just start yelling. And
you asked about teaching, if I may.
Sure.
And again, when I said commission earlier, I wasn't talking about the exchange of money so much as when you're given a commission like a warrant officer, you're given a charge to go do something. That still is relational. That was what I was trying to say.
Okay, yeah.
People above you and people about you that have jobs, and your job is to understand and focus. When I was teaching, it was a professional society, and there were people coming up in their profession that wanted to get certified as I was. And I'd done pretty well at it, and I always found that there were several different types of people listening. And I had to remember to speak in the language and the type of learning that they could appreciate, which meant I had to reach out a little bit. And I think that's part of what I believe is, for example, my childhood, the parents of other kids I knew from Sunday school, we went to Sunday school, now Sabbath, but how they were raised had a big influence on what I knew Christ was like.
Yeah.
So it's relational.
And then how hard it is for me to think about telling a child who has been beaten up by his father about his heavenly Father. The father image has been so badly distorted by people that have been misrepresented or misrepresenting things. And Jim, that is absolutely true. You got to find some kind of commonality to talk to people with.
It's been described as a language of love, and everybody hears it a different way. There's a book about it. Got to learn to speak the language of your mate.
That's why we have to rely on the Holy Spirit to help us with this, because he knows that other person very well. We may not. And sometimes, I don't know if you've found yourself doing something or saying something and you go, wow, where did that come from? I don't think that'll help anybody. And then later somebody says, that was what meant the most to me. And it's like, oof, that's no coincidence either.
Larry, I'd like to go back to Alice's comment too about being judgmental. And I think sometimes we carry that judgment into when we evangelize, and we've got to be so careful. I was thinking of a story in the hospital. Young 40-year-old guy came in and had a heart attack, and Dr. Budd was his doctor. And at that time, Dr. Budd was quite stringent about lifestyle. And
just that time?
Well, yeah.
I love Bill. He's a great guy.
Wonderful. That I had to talk. He came in a month later with some chest pain, and I had to talk to him about something. And I went in, and he says, I don't think Dr. Budd likes me. I said, well, why would you say that? He says, well, he's not really happy with what I've done in the last month. And I said, what have you done? Well, I gave up smoking. I gave up drinking. We're spending an hour shopping, trying to get the right foods. I looked at him and I said, you have made more changes than any man I've ever seen in the shortest time for after having a heart attack. And so, here was a man who probably had a few things he could still improve on for his life, but he had come so far. And, we would not want to judge him to say, well, you've done this, but you really haven't done enough. And so I think we've got to be very careful, because everybody's story, we also have the friend who paints for us, we've talked about before. And, if he came to church, he still smells of smoke. And he went out and bought a new shirt when he came to the greatest gift because he didn't have one. But if you hear his life, he was abused as a child. He was placed in that boarding home in the state, Larry, that was recently a documentary done on it where they totally abusive of them. He was a drug addict. He was an alcoholic. He has come so far in his life, and he knows, I know I need to give up smoking, but it's really, really hard. So again, people's lives we don't know how far they've come. And Lord, give us the empathy to understand that, you know, they've come a long ways. And that's something I long for in our church, that we provide that safe environment for people to come with all their scars and all their dysfunction and feel loved and be able to grow and feel fellowship. It's my dream for our church.
Yeah, no doubt about it. My oldest granddaughter, Isabel, has been joining Beverly and the Coosters over at community services since school finished. And she's having a wonderful time there. And, you know, it's really great to be able to reach out, get acquainted with people from different backgrounds, listen to their story, see what makes them who they are and what are their needs. And, you know, I think that's a fabulous work that we have that is a tremendous witness for it. And, you know, I can remember years ago knowing that if we had a single mother that gave birth and was destitute, I could call Mrs. Neller, and there'd be a package for her, a layette that they could take home so that she would have something for the baby. You know, and that's the kind of outreach that we need to be just doing so much of and be so ready for. Whoops, sorry, my phone here that has my lesson on it just shut off. So
you're having the morning.
I want to say something a little controversial about our society right now.
Okay, please do, Andre.
I think the way we're going right now, we're changing completely. You know, we're mixing advice and judgment into one. And people calling advice as a judgment, you know, if somebody judging me. It happened to me a few times, you know, and, you know, the simple example, you know, somebody asked me to help them at the gym, you know, to be a little bit more fit. And they were telling me, you know, hey, what should I do? You know, I said, well, you need to exercise, you know, you need to watch what you eat and, you know, keep coming to the gym. And, you know, we work out for a while, you know, and then, you know, I noticed the person when they come to the gym, they said, oh, it hurts. Oh, I'm going to go easy. Oh, I'm going to do this. Oh, I'm going to do that. It's hard, you know, and I like to eat and all of that. And then I said, well, you know, my suggestion, you should be in the gym a little bit longer and cut your portions, your food portions, you know. So that person exploded in my face. Oh, you judging me, you this, you that, you know. So, you know, and another thing, you know, what happens, you know, even with families, you know, when, you know, I know it's part of the society right now, you know, when you have kids, the parents give their kids a lot of freedom. Oh, they need to decide on their own because they're, you know, that's what right now, you know. Mm-hmm. But no, we parents have right to tell the kid what they should be, what they should do, what's right, what's wrong, you know?
I'll disagree with you on that. They do not have the right. They have the necessity, the responsibility, and the duty.
Yes, exactly. Yes. You know, but the society right now changing, saying, no, let 5-year-old figure out who they are.
We're on the same boat there, Andre.
You know, and it is hard, you know, like we saying, oh, no, we shouldn't judge people, but we should advise people, you know, we should tell them, you know, okay, this is what you should do if you ask questions, you know. You know, but
don't ask a question if you're not ready for the answer.
Exactly. Yeah.
Alice, you're muted, Alice.
Did that do it?
That did it.
Yeah. Need to, the thing about it is, how does a child learn what is right and what is wrong unless he is taught? This is the right, this is wrong. No, you can't lie about something, or, and, unless we guide the children in this, they will never know the difference. That's as parents, that's the duty of, quotes, parents.
Right. No, there's no question that there is so much relativism, and I have been taken to task by people for insisting that there is such thing as an absolute truth, absolute right, absolute wrong. That it isn't just how we feel about it today.
The church should be the same thing. It's a family. And the church should coach all of our members, what's right, what's wrong. And maybe I'm too old school, but this is how I was brought up.
Yeah.
I think we could use a little more old school, Oleg. And Larry.
No, you're using wisdom.
Larry, it's pretty amazing. The people who take you to task for believing there's absolute right and wrong, I bet the first time their house gets broken into or, something else, they are quickly converted to the idea that there's an absolute right and wrong.
Floyd.
Unfortunately, perception is reality. And there's a lot of people that perceive anything you're doing. I think that's what Oleg is talking to. Perceive what you're saying or doing as being judgmental. This society in which you have offended me, that becomes the basis of judgment rather than any other source.
And going back, though, to what Andre was saying about the church, and the real challenge for the church is to be able to effectively use church discipline in a redemptive way.
Mm-hmm. Floyd has his hands up.
I'm sorry, what? Floyd. Oh, yes, Floyd.
I believe that the Bible and all the writings and teachings were given to us as guidelines for how life should be lived, what we should do, and how life should be lived. Our parents gave that to us in guidelines. We don't have guidelines anymore. They're all out the window.
Yeah.
Do as you please today. That's one of the big problems. Everything I see going on around us is divisive, not making things cohesive.
Yeah. And that was what I wanted to make about my experience in our church board meeting about 10 days ago. How wonderful it was that the people could have a disagreement, could respect each other, recognize that there are differences in viewpoint, and how sad that was an unusual experience. So,
well, I think if I may, again, I'm not regularly part of this church, but I enjoy being part of the church.
You're here.
I agree that old school is a good thing. Being traditional is a good thing. I posted something just yesterday about remembering what our grandparents learned that was tried and true. Having it being true and having it been tried, we don't need to reinvent. While at the same time, we do need to adapt to each generation's ambitions. That doesn't mean that the young guys that are teaching me how to use the new technology, because I was one of those young guys that got grandma's VCR to stop blinking 12 once upon a time. I think there's something about even then, and when parents and grandparents grew up in the 1890s and the 1920s, they had groups of people that went off their own way and did their own things. We have mass technology now that's always in our face. And I just tune out of it for a week or two at a time. I don't have to get the cable news all the time. I don't have to be on the Facebook all the time. And I can just go for a nice walk and enjoy God's creation.
And that's one of the wonderful things about living here in Maine. Things are a little behind the times. There's plenty of space. And how should I put it? There is an acceptance, perhaps even a celebration of eccentric people. And so, okay. Living water. Remember that section in today's lesson, or this week's lesson? Talking about how the word of Christ can be like fresh water at the Dead Sea. What do we mean by that?
Now, we don't give, we become stagnant and hypersalinic.
I know, trying to explain to a 10-year-old why the ocean water is so salty. But what about the living water?
The only way it remains living water is because it's moving. So, yeah, point A to point B, one soul to another. Yes.
Yeah. And things get changed. Notice how much different your lawn works. Look how much different your lawn looks this week than last week. Something about that 4 inches of rain that gave life to the lawn.
So, what are the thoughts on when you have people that you care about? Hold on a second. I'm right next door to my neighbors at camp, and they're on my mind. We have wonderful neighbors who are so kind and generous and just delightful to be with. And, I look for opportunities to try to share things, and I have, but it's pretty apparent that there's a wall there. Mm-hmm. So, the lesson, I think, or maybe it was Doug Batchelor, somebody that I was listening to the lesson, they talked about how, there are times when you don't go out and witness.
I would disagree with that. You're always going to be witnessing.
Right, but, the
back off.
Traditional kind of thought. Yeah, mm-hmm. So we just keep being sweet, kind people, and hopefully someday something will cause them to ask. What? Terry. Unmute, Terry.
Yeah. I think it's really important to continue to, do what you're doing and just allow the Holy Spirit, because God knows who's open. And, from my own experience, if you had spoken to me 10 years ago, there would have been a total wall. And I would have been like, oh, Bible thumpers over here, and, that was one of the great things about Jeff and being so friendly with me, is that, he just lived his faith in front of me. And even though I didn't know what I was witnessing, the Holy Spirit was working in me. And so when I finally took that step and walked through the doors, the whole new world opened up to me. So really, you just keep doing what you're doing and the Holy Spirit will work the work for you.
Thank you for that, Terry.
Thank you for the report from the front.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's that way with relatives. I don't know if you all feel how you feel that's a mission field, and yet, that balancing of not turning off. And I have found with my cousins of that generation that I've not preached much, but when there's a crisis, I seem to be the person that they're drawn to. And that gives me a little bit of comfort that they see something in me, that I have a strength from something, and I think they know I give all the glory to God. So I pray. I still always feel a little guilty when I don't maybe preach overtly. I got together with my cousins for the first time, the girls, last summer, And I think at least 50 times they said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Beverly," because they're cussers. And, but they were cognizant of it, and I didn't make a big deal, but I was the one that offered the prayer for the lunch. They asked me to do that. So you don't know, sometimes you just got to put it in God's hands and, pray that your life might be enough for some people.
I've actually had to pray, God, shut me up.
Oh, that's good. Say, I'm going to have to sign off a little bit early because I have two granddaughters that desperately wanted to attend church this morning, and it's a little bit of time to get there from here. And I think that's a top priority. So I'm going to sign out. Thank you all for bearing with me. Thank you for putting up with my somewhat disjointed ramblings this morning. Maybe it was completely disjointed.
Thank you so much, and bless you.
Thank you. Thank you. And have a good Sabbath day.
Happy Sabbath.
Great. Thank you, Larry, for leading our study time today. I'm here in the studio inside the church this week, thus the mask. And I've had some inquiries as to what is on my mask. I will get a little closer. It is the P-3 Orion. Those planes used to be stationed right here at Naval Air Station Brunswick before the station was decommissioned a few years ago. So I'm supporting the Navy today. Well, thank you for joining us live today on this 4th of July. If you're watching later, thank you. And we hope you enjoyed our study time. We will live stream our first in-person worship service since February, coming up at 11 o'clock today. The program will be similar to what we've had in the past weeks, with our limit of 50 in-person worshipers joining in the sanctuary for Pastor Nathan's message today. If you'd like to join us in person for worship in the coming weeks, look for the sign-up email from the church in your email inbox. For the near term, we will continue our Sabbath school in its current format. Nothing live in the church. It will all be virtual and live streamed on Zoom and on YouTube. Well, we wish you well this 4th of July. Happy birthday, Dottie Kruger. If celebrating this 4th of July with fireworks, please do so safely for yourself and others. We look forward to seeing you next week on Zoom Live or on the same YouTube channel. Thanks. Happy holidays. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Happy birthday, Dottie.
Happy
Jim,
birthday.
It's good to have you.